This week on the podcast, I think I might have finally cracked this productivity crisis here in the UK. Keep listening to find out why. Welcome to the Profit Cash Growth Podcast. This is the podcast for 6 and 7 figure business owners who are looking to grow a financially successful business. My co-host, Claire Hancott, is a finance director, chartered accountant and entrepreneur. And every week, I'll be exploring guidance and frameworks designed to help you increase your profits, improve your cash flow and grow your business. Right, we had a good night last night, didn't we, Claire?
Yep, we went out, we played darts, had some cocktails.
I forgot about the darts.
You forgot about the darts.
I was just
so
talking
good.
about my new love of Japanese food, which has just gone insane, isn't it?
Went for Japanese,
and
then we rounded it off with a luxury night in the Travelodge.
Yes, why? Because it's cheap to stay in a Travelodge. Just get a taxi to and from our house.
£40 for a night in the Travelodge, and it was a brand new Travelodge, so it was lovely.
To the UK economy, where it's now more expensive to get a taxi to and from your destination than it is to just stay in a hotel there.
Yeah, it's bizarre, isn't it?
Bizarre.
It's really bizarre.
Anyway, talking about Travelodge, I've always got my business head on, haven't I? And I was in like total awe, wasn't I, of how they set up their business. Like their rooms are just like, they're genius. I said to you that basically we should set up all of our like rental properties this way. Like they are just like, they're designed to be really low maintenance, really easy to clean. It felt like, as I imagine is the case, that you could go into that room and do absolutely anything, and by tomorrow morning they could return it back to its perfect state that it was. There's not even shower trays. It's just a wet room. Like the cleaning's dead easy. It's just so functional. I felt like in the bathroom, you feel like you're on a train toilet, you know, where they've got like the stainless steel all-in-one sink type thing.
Even it's down to, they don't put tea and coffees in the room anymore, but they have tea and coffee stations so that the cleaning staff, I guess, don't have to replenish tea and coffee in the individual bedrooms.
Yeah.
They still say it's available. You know, there was plenty of supply of it. You just help yourself to everything, take it back to the room with you.
Exactly. Now, I'm not a massive fan of low-cost things, as you know. I'm a bit of a diva from that perspective.
Yeah, you are.
But like there are a few brands that are just like I say, we had this conversation about you can either be one or two things, can't you? You can either be right at the bottom of the market or right at the top of the market, but it's very difficult to be in the middle, in that squeezed middle where people's expectations, you know, the price isn't quite enough, but their expectations are more than the price can really deliver and all that kind of thing. And I think Travelodge do this really well and Ryanair do this really well. It's like, you can't really complain about it. Wetherspoons do it really well. Yeah. You can't really complain about it
because you know what you're getting.
You know what you're getting. Yeah. And actually they do it solid and their model's very well honed. And then you go right to the top of the market and you're paying top dollar for something and they absolutely deliver because your expectations are so high. But then you've got this kind of middle thing where you're like, oh, my expectation's quite high because it's quite an expensive meal out. But then they haven't really got the money to deliver on the service at the level you expected and they let people down. So it's always best to be, what was the saying that I hear a lot? You can't be everything to everyone, otherwise you're nobody to no one.
Yeah, that's
something along those lines.
Yeah,
and it's very true, isn't it? Riches in niches and all that. Anyway, shall we move on to this week's news story of the week?
Absolutely.
Woohoo! So, shock. We are not, I said, we're never talking about Trump's tariffs. So, with
this
a
is
slight,
so important
this is
that
so
we've
important.
Got to mention it.
It is linked to his tariffs and it is a result of his tariffs. But will Marks and Spencer's have to pull Percy Pigs from the US because of the tariffs?
Yeah, so Percy Pigs have launched in Target stores from the 30th of March this year. And then obviously Donald Trump's come in and launched these tariffs and it's causing a bit of mayhem for them. But M&S have come out and they've said that they're not going to pull them from America, but they are now worried that they are going to have to increase prices, obviously, and they're worried that the price point means that they're not going to be popular and therefore ultimately they would need to be withdrawn from the market because they just simply don't work from a commercial perspective anymore.
And looking at this news story, I mean, before they even react to the tariffs, the price point is $3.99 a bag for the family size bag. It's pretty high, isn't it?
It is pretty high because I think they're £2 in the UK, aren't they?
I don't know. I don't buy Percy Pigs enough, but probably it feels like they'd be about that. I reckon they'd be like maybe $2.50, that sort of thing. So $3.99, pretty sizable. And then they're going to probably have to stick another 20% on top of it. So who's going to want those Percy Pigs in the US, especially when it's a brand that's new in the US consumer's mind. It's probably a difficult decision for M&S to make, to stick with it.
Now, the most interesting thing I found in this article, though, is not about the story of Percy Pigs.
Really?
Actually, it was generally giving quite a lot of business information about M&S. And one of the things that they said in the advert was that their Christmas advert is in jeopardy as well this year because of a change in legislation by government, and that's the junk food ban that's coming in to the UK in October this year, that companies can't advertise junk food before the watershed on TV.
Right.
And M&S have said that what this means is that they're not allowed to put Christmas puddings, mince pies and pigs in blankets.
Is a Christmas pudding
on their
classed as junk?
Because of the sugar content in it.
Interesting.
So they're saying that they're going to have to completely rethink how they do their Christmas advert, and it would probably be more focused on gifting, like their home and lifestyle range and clothing range, rather than their food range, which I think would be quite... I mean, I'm not big into watching these blooming Christmas adverts that come out every year and seem to get more ridiculous, but one that does stick in my mind in particular is the Aldi advert with the little carrot that jumps around everywhere. And imagine if they can't do that anymore.
What, is a carrot junk food?
No, but,
okay.
You there are certain things you can't show on a traditional Christmas dinner anymore.
You must be quite happy about this junk food ad ban and that, because I mean, you hate you just hate people eating junk food, don't you? I don't know why. That's the wrong way to do it.
No, I really...
You can't give in to temptation, so you don't want anyone else to have the advertisements, do you?
No, I'm somebody, I am a food addict. I cannot control what food goes in my mouth, and I find it incredibly difficult. And I do think that I've taken the time over the years to educate myself about nutrition and things like that, so that my mind turns me off this food as much as possible. But for the general public who don't have any dot of interest in food nutrition, they believe that the way that they're sold products make them healthy, protein bars, low fat bars, high in this, contains one of your 5 a day, and all of those types of things. I just think
all these marketing hooks
is disgusting, and I don't think that we should be allowed to market food in the way that we do. And I do think I would like to see our supermarkets have like this sectioned off area, so you can go and you can get your basics, your proper basic meat and veg and your dairy products, and then everything that comes in a packet and is remotely processed has to be in like a cordoned off area.
Do you mean like they do with pork in Dubai?
Yes.
Like behind the curtain?
Yeah, and alcohol in Dubai as well, don't they?
So like if you want some Percy Pigs, you've got to go behind the curtain.
It would make it so clear on what we should be eating versus what we shouldn't be eating. And I think all of our obesity issues would be resolved.
Nice, Claire. Well, there you go. So will they be pulled, won't they? Watch this space. And if you want some Percy Pigs, then buy them in the UK or stay here. Don't buy them in the US. Right, let's move on to this week's Deep Dive. So, Claire, this week, I think I have a theory. So you know that the UK has a very well-renowned productivity crisis over the last 25 years. So it's very, very clear that for the past, at least 20 years, but probably 25 years, our productivity in the UK has pretty much flatlined.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I have done some analysis and looked at something that started to get really concerning. And this is about it's all linked to, obviously, the forced increase in minimum wage by our government through policy change over the last 25 years. And obviously, they've driven up minimum wage significantly through policy. And that got me thinking about, it actually sparked me thinking, because we know that the other narrative we get is that real wages don't increase, or wages haven't been keeping up, or people aren't getting better off because their wages aren't increasing. So it got me thinking, if we've forced through policy change minimum wage up so aggressively, but the narrative that everyone's wages on average aren't going up, is there a problem brewing here? That was my initial thought, and it got me deep diving into it a bit more.
And I think that is easy to slip into the political side of this and say, well, the living wage has to increase, or national minimum wage has to increase, because it's not enough for people to live on otherwise. And I think that's not what we're trying to discuss today, as to whether that minimum wage should be what it is. I think what we're more getting into is that in comparison to what the average person is earning is more concerning.
So it's really just 25 years of a particular policy they've been pulling and what that looks like 25 years on, and whether there is anything that we can learn, we need to be aware of or alerted to that particularly policy lever has caused. So I want to give you some stats first, Claire, and to sort of set the scene, and then we can have a bit of a conversation about what we think, whether we think this is something that could be a concern, or could be, as I say, my theory for what may even be causing the productivity crisis that we've got. So in 1999, that's when minimum wage was first introduced by the government. The minimum wage set was £3.60 per hour for everyone aged over 22 years old.
In 1999, when that was introduced, the average earnings of an individual was £16,500, and the minimum wage for a full-time worker was, just call it £7,000, give or take a bit, which meant that the minimum wage was set at 42% of the average wage.
Yeah, so 7,000 versus the 16,000. If you wind the clock forward to 2025, today, the UK minimum wage, after the changes in April, are now 23,809,000, and the median wage for the UK is 37,232. So the minimum wage now represents 64% of the average wage in the UK. So it's a jump from representing 42% to 64% of that.
Now, because I'm a numbers person and I think how you present numbers is everything, I wanted to share a little staggering statistic to say that if we put this in comparison, that in 1999, the minimum wage should represent 42% of the average earnings. Yeah. In 2025, if these two numbers had kept in sync with each other, then the average earnings should now be £56,700.
Correct.
Which is staggering.
It's staggering. So the point here, I think, is a couple of things. There would have been a theory that people wouldn't have known when they started this policy, but the theory would have been that if you raise the minimum wage, that it pushes up all the other wages. So everybody gets better off. Yeah. It raises the average wage in this country, people get paid more for their labour, so on and so forth. What's actually happened, which is bizarre, is we have this very high minimum wage entry level. So you can go into at the bottom level of your company and you're going to get paid 23,000. But the compression across all of those different wage bands has compressed dramatically because everyone else's wages haven't really gone up.
Yeah.
So you've now got this situation where, effectively, I guess to put this into practice, there's this element of, if you come into the shop as the shop assistant on minimum wage of 23,809, but the general manager's role, let's say 30 grand, how much desire do you have to take on that additional responsibility, the accountability, the out of hours calls, having to cash up and, all that stress that comes with that next roll up for just a tiny fraction of what you would have used to have got? And how much is that damaging productivity in our country because people are losing the motivation and the incentive to want to progress up through the ranks and actually push themselves further? That's the debate I want to have and the conversation I wanted to have today, Claire, because I don't think it can be ignored as, I guess the question is it just a contributing factor to the many things to do with productivity, or have I cracked it?
I think this is a huge part of it. People's desire to work isn't there. And I say work as in get ahead, because everybody has to work.
Forward.
But to keep moving forward, it's like, well, that promotion, it's not worth it for a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I think also what this is doing is this is eroding the quality of people that are in businesses at middle management, which therefore has a humongous impact on productivity, because managers are not effective at what they do. Because as a business, the cost of hiring a decent manager really should probably be 50 to 60 grand now. But most businesses probably have more like 35 to 40 grand to spend on a manager. So they're getting somebody that is wanting to take that next step rather than is coming in with years of experience and a background in doing it and, a proven track record of being an effective manager. So they're taking somebody that's learning on the job, probably isn't really skilled for the job. And therefore, that person that is in control of, ultimately a manager is there to make that team a high-performing team. Make sure that department is delivering on the financial goals of the business. But a new manager on probably 35 to 40 grand probably doesn't have the skill set for this. Now, I will add to this that, we've got to put a caveat that we're in the southeast. and wages are a lot higher than if we're talking, you know, some rural areas, particularly in Wales or Northern England, Scotland, places like that. There are little pockets where it maybe doesn't apply in general, but I think we can say that when we're talking about the UK labour marketplace and small businesses, because at the end of the day, the vast majority of them are located in Southern England.
Do you think there's another element which is to do with sort of talent retention? So do you believe that companies might struggle to retain ambitious staff if they don't have the salaries that commensurate with the positions that those staff, aspire to go into?
I think it's a really difficult one because...
And is it just a national problem, so it doesn't matter? Because where do you leap to if everyone's the same?
It's not a national problem though, because there are some businesses that are growing and can afford those salaries. And I know from, trying to recruit accountancy people where I'm competing with the big accounting firms, it's very difficult for a small business to compete with that. But I also put on my head from when I used to work in the corporate world. And what would happen is we would be very good at giving people the opportunity to get promoted.
Yeah.
And often when somebody gets promoted is their salary increases a bit, but not commensurate to if you went out in the market and got somebody experienced to do the job. And so you normally get 12, 18, sometimes 24 months of that person as they're learning on the job. But then once they've got 2 years experience in that promotion, they then start saying, pay me like you recruited me externally.
Yeah.
And the business doesn't. And that's why they lose it. And so therefore, there is an element that you've only got the business to blame. And as an employee, 9 times out of 10, the only way to get a fair rate for the job that you're doing is to move.
There is
when you've been promoted.
Just to contradict myself here, there is another line of thought that says that people aren't necessarily, you see this a lot in surveys, employment surveys, that people aren't necessarily motivated by the money. So actually, do they remain motivated for those positions because there's other motivations such as power? A lot of people just want the power to be able to be a manager, be able to, control, manage, tell people what to do, that type of thing. Status is a big thing. It's human nature. It's human behaviour. It does that override the money challenge that people get moving into those roles?
I absolutely think there is an element to that you never really want an employee that is purely motivated on money. There's got to be other reasons why they're doing it. Right. And that is often why people take promotions in the workplace. They take on extra responsibility and things like that might not come with extra salary. But after a while, that individual will forget the job that they had before. It's normally about 12 to 18 months when the newness and the novelty of being a new manager or being in their promoted position has worn off. And now they're thinking, I've now got all this crap of this higher paid position, this higher responsibility position without the pay of it.
Then they look back at the pay for actually, this just doesn't feel worth it. I mean, and then you roll this into business owners. This is not dissimilar to the incentives that we've seen eroded away from business owners over the last 20 years as well. You've seen things like the dividend allowance cut, you've seen corporation tax go up, you've seen all these different things which have taken, the same way that this has happened with employees, has taken, lots of those drives and incentives away from moving out of employment and into, being a business owner as well, which again, strives again towards that productivity issue and this, thing of people wanting to set up companies, wanting to take the risk and the risk being worth it. And it's just fascinating because what we end up with here is just this very flat kind of structure in the country where it's like, it's almost like UBI, like the universal basic income argument, isn't it? Of hang on a minute. So, your cleaner gets 27 grand a year, your manager's getting near enough the same, and your so-and-so's getting something. And everybody's just looking for whatever the easiest job is to do to match the money because there's no incentive there to do anything different.
Yeah, and I do agree that the national...
I might have nailed something. This could be a conspiracy here. Do you think we are being pushed through policy towards UBI?
No, I do not for 1 second. I'm not a big fan of conspiracy theories at all.
Well, the whole UBI thing's been talked about a lot, hasn't it? Especially with AI coming along.
It has been talked about a lot, but literally no government supports it. So I struggle to believe that
policy's
the
driving
government,
this closing gap where
the government is
the same.
What you're suggesting is that the government is colluding completely
not
in
colluding,
secret
I'm just saying it's...
to drive this. It's not written in their policy, and nobody's leaked it. Not one person that's been involved in that government. Literally hundreds of people. Not one person's decided to leak something. This is the thing with conspiracy theories, is there's never any evidence. So no, I do not believe for 1 second.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? That you don't know they always say when you put a policy in place as a government that you actually don't really know the outcome until 20 years down the line. And I would be amazed if when they started down this route of raising living standards at minimum wage, that every research paper out there didn't suggest that it would push up everyone's wages commensurate.
Yeah.
And the gap will remain the same. So it's just absolutely fascinating that that's not happened. And no one's talking about this, are they?
It is
Nobody's talking about it.
Well, we are talking about it.
Apart from us. But when do you hear anybody talk about it?
Well, you must have read this somewhere in order for it to be...
No, it just got me thinking because somebody mentioned about... I literally saw a stat in my industry, a meme that came up that said, ask yourself this, and it was your lowest level negotiator in a estate agency. Your negotiator got paid X in X year and is now gets paid X in this year, but your branch manager gets paid this in this year. Is something wrong? ?
Mm-hmm.
And it just got me thinking more broadly. And yeah, it's a national issue.
What I think is really interesting about this is when you start thinking about the broader what's happening in the country, and generally when we talk about how much wages are increasing and things like that, actually so much of that is coming from the national minimum wage increases and not actual real wage increases.
Or
and
productivity.
That's an issue when we start to then look at what's happening with inflation, because how much wages are going up drives a lot of statistics in terms of reporting around inflation, and therefore that information is then used by business owners to make decisions around pricing and things like that. But actually we are potentially getting to the point where people might be pricing themselves higher than the average person in the UK can now afford, because if you see a statistic that says, okay, well, wages have increased by 5%, and therefore you think, well, if people have got 5% more disposable income, maybe I can put 5% on my prices too. Well, actually no, probably the average wage has gone up by maybe 1 or 2%, but national minimum wage has gone up by 8%.
Yeah.
And it's the impact of that. So you could price yourself out your market if you're not careful.
So moving aside from the facts and the outcomes of this, let's talk a little bit about, just quickly, any strategic considerations that business owners and employers can take to this. I guess for me there's a few, which is to just be aware of it and to be aware of what their relevant compensation structures look like based on the different roles within their business and how that may affect people's motivators, their aspirations, the way that they're incentivized and driven. And I think just be aware of it and just be aware of whether you can do something to make sure that you keep incentives there. If you can't do it from a monetary perspective, you could consider things like enhancing non-monetary incentives. So, role at the bottom, minimum wage role is just a salaries role, but, manager role gets extra holiday, manager role gets, extra flexibility, manager role gets lunch vouchers. There's things that can be done, isn't there, that are non-monetary that make that role aspirational to try and strive towards, which I think is important as well, that people have, that aspiration. And just outlining those progression routes for different people in their organisation and what the benefits are of them getting to those areas, really.
I think it's really important as well that as business owners, the longer we've been out of the marketplace ourselves in terms of jobs and things like that, and also in a small business, when you're not recruiting as much and as often, you can quite quickly lose touch with what's happening in the recruitment marketplace. And so I think it's really important that you get, you've got a reliable source, for example, average wages in your industry. Most of the recruitment agencies, if you find a specialist in your agency, they'll produce like an annual report on average salaries for different roles and things like that. I think it's really important that you don't lose touch with what's really happening in the marketplace, because I can be guilty or myself of saying, average accountant's wage is 40 grand. It's not 60 grand. I'm stuck 20 years ago. I'm thinking about what happened when I was newly qualified. And so don't lose touch. And if you're really not sure, just put a job advert out. See what sort of response you get and see if the CVs that you're getting for your job advert really are appropriate for the skill set that you've got as well.
Yeah. Well, I think the one thing to celebrate, isn't it, is that is a phenomenal leap for people in living standards, isn't it? To think that at the turn of this millennium, whatever that job was you were doing at £3.60 an hour is now £12.57. I've lost the current one that's just been like
nearly 4 times as much.
Nearly 4 times. So those people have had like a 300-400% pay increase over the last 20 years, which is fantastic.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to really understand what it has done for living standards and where somebody's money is going now.
I guess the irony is, here we are 25 years on talking about a cost of living crisis, the worst living standards in history, but a 400% increase in people's wages at that level. Something just doesn't add up, does it?
But because I think the people that are really struggling now are like what they refer to as the jams. They're just about managing, don't they? And that is this middle income household, because you start to lose your ability to get these other benefits that top up low earners' income.
Yeah. Cool. Right. I don't think we're going to completely solve the whole productivity crisis, but I think I'm onto something here.
I do think you're onto something, yeah. Just as a closing point, I would really urge business owners to carefully look at the salaries that they're offering to their managers when you're thinking about putting that second layer into your business, because how a manager manages a team and how effective that team is will make a significant difference to the overall profitability of your business.
It's the irony, isn't it?
If you've got a high-performing team, then the profit that they will deliver in your business is like chalk and cheese to if you've got a manager that's, perhaps not got the skill set, what's required to motivate a team, coordinate a team, have effective meetings, communicate properly, give feedback, retain staff, all of these things that is part of being a manager. If you're not paying enough, you simply will not get the right skill set in your business, and it will come through in the results that you're getting.
And I mean, frankly, you hit the nail on the head there. It's all about, the sheer difference in skills between, that person that's got none of those things whatsoever, that are on the minimum wage. They are just a pair of hands to do what they do in that particular instance, all the way up to, when you sat that alongside what you just described, I think should be 4 times the salary of that person that I just described.
Yeah.
The problem is with that, it's £100,000 salary. For a general manager, for a branch manager, or whatever you call them, that middling manager, and it's just not what that role currently pays. That role would probably pay 40, wouldn't it? Let's be honest.
Well, it's interesting because if you look over at the US, and I don't want to get into this too much, but if you look over at the US, that role probably is $150,000 a year, $150,000.
But their entire wage structure has grown significantly because their economy's grown significantly.
Their whole entire wage structure, their increases have outstripped us. But maybe if we looked at what had happened in America and extrapolate that back in terms of exchange rates, that should be more or less the salaries that we should be paying higher workers in the UK.
Yeah. It's not, we're way off, aren't we? Great, let's move on to this week's Profit Cash Growth Extra then. This week, Claire, I've upgraded my AirPods.
You have. You had AirPod 3s?
I am so glad that I did. I researched this, and researchers thought they're all the same. Time to move on to the next ones. And I went for some active noise cancelling.
AirPod Pros.
AirPods. No, they're not AirPod Pros.
They are.
No, they're not. They're just normal. They're not the Pros. That's different. They've got the little squeegee bits in them. So these are just the standard AirPod 4, but they do 2 versions. They do non-active noise cancelling and active noise cancelling. The active noise cancelling are about 50 quid more. It's a big jump up in sort of the price, but I had no comprehension that they were going to be this good. Like, they are literally, considering they're in-ear bud type earphones, they really, really do cut out the sound around you. So I can't believe I ever heard anything in the gym before.
When you put them in your ear, it's almost like this sort of like suction effect. You can sort of like, you can hear and you can feel it doing something.
It's like you go underwater.
Yeah.
It's that kind of feeling. It's amazing. So the great thing about this is that everything's so much more clearer, so much more immersive. But you can even just pop them in and put nothing on, just to drown out the people around you, to do real focus work. So often when we're sitting next to each other, I will just pop them in, won't I?
To drown me out.
And it actively cuts out the noise of the huge pause on the keyboard that you do.
Shut up. What I would say is I have never been a fan of AirPods because they make my ears hurt after a little while. But you did give me your old, I think they're like version 3 AirPods or something to use, and they're non-noise cancelling. And I took them to the gym with me, and I've got a pair of headphones by Jaybird because they're more like sporty headphones, which is where I typically use my headphones, is in the gym. So I went to the gym with the AirPods that are not noise cancelling, and I had them on full volume, and I could not listen to a podcast. I got so frustrated that I took them out in the end because I just couldn't. It was fine for music, but not for a podcast. I couldn't really hear what was going on. It was diabolical.
Well, these solve everything.
Yeah. So if you have got non-noise cancelling AirPods,
the technology now is just unbelievable.
Just upgrade them.
Every time I think, it's not worth upgrading something, a few years goes by and the technology is just moving on so quick that you're just like, how is this even possible? So think about that. If you like to sort of have real focus time and real focus work, they are active noise cancelling AirPods. So thank you for joining us for another week's podcast. As always, if you feel like you might have outgrown your current accountant and you'd like to work with Claire and the team at Profit Cash Growth, nip over to the website, profitcashgrowth.com. On there, you can book a discovery call, our free finance health check, or any other lovely things that you wish to do. And have a listen back through all of the podcasts, tons and tons of evergreen content, great educational content for you to help you grow your business. And also just pop it over to one business friend of yours and say you need to listen to this podcast because it's going to help you grow your business. And we'll see you again next week.